Okay, hi, my name is Mordecai Ogada. I'm a Kenyan conservation biologist. These days, I work more in the conservation policy and human rights space. And I live in Nanyuki in Kenya, which is a town near Mount Kenya, just on the equator. My passion very much is how people live and use their natural environments in a sustainable way while also protecting their rights to use the resources. So that's why I'm very interested in the Greenspaces project, because these are very important for urban people, particularly those who are not wealthy enough to go out on a trip to a national park or go out touring somewhere. So they need green spaces nearby them for the health of themselves and their children as well. Okay, there are two main reasons here. One, there are those that are being depleted because of infrastructure development. Basically, stuff is being built on them, and this includes highways and some high-rise buildings as well. And this happens because of basically commercial pressure, and governments or society feels that that open green space is not making money. So this is basically capitalism, and that has been a big problem in Kenya. There are few that have been built over, but there are few that we have managed to prevent being built over by because of the protests and all that. This started with the late Wangari Maathai in the late 1990s. There was a big media company from the UK going to build a building in Uhuru Park, which is in the center of Nairobi, and she stood up against that, and the plan got shelved. And there's also been the city park in Nairobi, which was going to be handed over to the Aga Khan Foundation to build some facility in there, but we protested, and then that was shelved as well. But there's a lot of pressure in Kenya because real estate prices in Nairobi are sky high, and there's always capitalist pressure to develop these. The second challenge to green spaces is what I can call gentrification. And it has happened to Uhuru Park now, the same park which Wangari Maathai protested about. They sort of decide that they want to quote unquote improve the park to quote unquote international standards. So what this involves is basically the first thing they do is fence it off. Then they fence it off, then they build maybe some more fancy or high class infrastructure, park benches, put some statues or sculptures in there, and they make a gate which people go, which is open, can be opened and closed. So they claim the facility is better now that they've got a fence around it and a gate. But in many societies, including Kenya, a gate, even if it's not closed or you're not prevented from going in, it's intimidating to many people, especially the lower class people. They start to feel like they don't belong, and they end up not using the green space. And so they lose, they psychologically, the green space loses, it's no longer comfortable for them to go and lie down under a tree or chat with their, play around with their kids and this kind of thing. And that sort of development in the green spaces, it involves a lot of, there's a lot of loss of green because a lot of grass is transformed into concrete pathways for people to walk around or people to cycle around. So there's a lot of loss of grass. Then they, for some strange thing in reason in Kenya, they also cut down a lot of the indigenous trees and plant exotic tree species that they think are more beautiful and will give the park a more sort of raise it to the so-called international standards. So anyway, it makes it a more expensive place to be, a more exclusive kind of place, and a place that is no longer friendly to the urban lower class people who need these green spaces more than anyone else. So it's very unfortunate. And even in the process of doing this, like if I still with the example of Uhuru Park, the process of doing this involved closing off the park to the public for a period of, I think it took around 2.5 years when no one could get in there. It's now reopened, but the disconnect between the people who used to use it has already happened. So it will take time if it's to recover its status as the important green space that it is. It's become a different green space. It's no longer the sort of beloved green space that it was before. And this is something that that goes unnoticed in many areas, because the loss of green spaces goes under the banner of improvement of those green spaces, and this is not always the case. I think because you're right, colonialism was it was a capitalist venture, and it was about exploiting resources in the colonies. Now, if you see the loss of green spaces, the way the cities developed, like even Nairobi, for a long time, Nairobi developed with very clear demarcation. There was the area where the white people used to live. These the areas where the high class people live now, and where all the diplomats and all the others live. Then there were areas even in Nairobi and schools where the Indians used to live. These were the Asians were brought in by the British colonialists to do various clerical work, engineering work, and sort of mid-level civil servants. So our Kenyan society was stratified into three strata. One was the white people at the top, the Asians in the middle, and the black people at the bottom. There are a few towns in Kenya where you can still see some of these divisions in housing areas and this kind of thing. The government sees Nairobi as a very important urban center, commercial hub now. So they want to make the city center high class. They want to make the city center high class, and these green spaces were all being used by the low class people. So that is why they've done these things I'm calling improvements, the so-called improvements. It's to make it high class, and this is alienating the lower people, and it's a capitalist thing, because they want to make Nairobi a capitalist, high class commercial hub. It's also about pretty much about capitalism, because now if you look at the green spaces out there, where there's the nature, the wildlife, and all that, they're used by people for keeping their livestock. People collect medicinal plants, vegetables, fruits, and stuff in the forests, and they graze their animals there. But now these conservation structures want to sort of privatize these spaces, so that it is not just a place where people use and share with their wildlife. It becomes a national park where human beings are kept out, apart from those who can pay. So it's pretty much putting fences around nature and putting a gate for it to be paid. So conservation, what we are talking about in conservation, uh, as conservation, is actually capitalism. We are trying to make money from every elephant, from every monkey, from every tree, and these are and we are denying. To do this, we have to deny access to the people who have grown up, populations who have grown up and evolved together with this nature. Now they have to be cut off for this to be commercialized. So it's conservation right now. It always involves taking something away from the owner and selling it to a rich person who can pay for it. So when you hear of something called protected areas, it means an area that is protected from its owners, or an area that is taken from its owners. That's the problem with conservation and protected areas right now. It's the capitalism. Okay, I think all I can add is that capitalism right now is failing. It's failing in conservation, and it's failing around the world as well, because it leads to violence. And so it's not socially sustainable, the level of capitalism we are trying to do. That's why we have people with guns in national parks, which should not be there. Guns to protect nature from people who are living in nature. So we need to find a different way to temper or reduce the capitalism that drives violence if we are to have a sustainable future. Otherwise, the future is just going to be very violent, and there'll be a lot of loss of life and loss of human rights.